Sorry. I wish Marius had been there so he could have talked about this stuff. Anyway, so we're talking about the law, and actually he talked about adversarial law, and that's the kind of law we have in the United States. As we know, there's two different types, inquisitorial and adversarial. In the United States, we use the adversarial system, and that's what Dr. Austin was talking about. We use the adversarial system, and it doesn't specifically work with this population, with the native population, and that's really what he was talking about. Okay? Cognitive psychologists have proposed two process models of human judgment which are useful for understanding how judges make decisions. Models of human judgment distinguish between intuitive processes that occur spontaneously, often without careful thought or effort, or deliberative processes that involve mental effort, concentration, motivation, and application of learned rules. Now, if we went to see the judge and we said, you need to make this decision right now, he would have to use the intuitive process. He wouldn't be able to look it up. He wouldn't be able to ask anybody else. He wouldn't be able to use the deliberative process because he would have to make a decision right now. So the intuitive process has to do with how you feel right now, making a decision from the way that you feel. The deliberative process, you look at all of the facts. And this is what happened with me this summer. My daughter was trying to move out of Florida. In order for her to move out of Florida, they had to go to court. The judge had to decide whether it was more important for my grandson to be with his father every other weekend and every once in a great while, or for him to move to Iowa where it's a much healthier environment. And of course, if he'd stayed in Florida, they would have gotten washed out in the hurricane over the weekend. My son is still in Mobile, Alabama, so they bugged out, as they were supposed to do. But my grandson would have had to have done the same thing. So, of course, I'm waiting for a very quick decision so I can help my daughter move. But they didn't come up with a quick decision. It took them weeks. They had to deliberate. They had to think about it. They had to look at all the facts. And then the judge came up with her decision, and the decision was to allow my daughter to move. But by that time, I had already come down here. Up here. Oh, no, down here. Where am I? Arizona. Okay. I'm right here. Okay.
I know what it
It's down because, yeah, it's north of here. Okay. Although judges try to make decisions by relying on facts, evidence, and legal rules rather than on personal biases or emotions, because they are ordinary people, judges tend to have intuitive reactions. And this is what happened to me when I got my first divorce. My wife had left. She had gone to Illinois. And I was in Texas all by myself. I divorced my wife, and I wanted sole custody of my children. Well, my wife wasn't contesting that. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that my judge was a Baptist minister. Oh, whoops. He was a Baptist minister. And when he found out that I wasn't a Baptist, yeah, that's strike one. And when he found out I didn't go to church at all, that's strike two. So he's ready to take my kids away from me because I didn't give them proper religious training. I had people come in, my neighbor came in, I let my kids go to church anytime she wants to take them to church. It's okay with me. Okay. But that wasn't enough. That wasn't enough. I already had the two strikes against me. And the strike three turned out to be the fact that I'm a male. He believed that a female child will be molested by any male or whatever. Anyway, so he told me in court, this is the judge, told me in court that I was going to molest my daughter. I'm going, really? Thank you. I was wondering what was going to happen next. Anyway, so this was all intuitive. This wasn't deliberative. He didn't look at the statistics. It was all his feelings. His feelings were that you had to give your children religious training, and that Baptist, of course, Baptist religious training was the best, but any religious training was better than nothing. And of course, the fact that I was a male trying to take care of my female child was taboo as far as he was concerned. So he was ready to take my children away from me. but it didn't happen. And the reason it didn't happen was because I'm from Indiana. And I was a citizen of the state of Indiana. Both of my children were born in Indiana. So he couldn't take my children away from me because they were not citizens of the state of Texas. That's just where I got my divorce. So he wasn't able to take them away. He would have had to petition the state of Indiana for custody of my children. And they wouldn't have allowed it to happen because they have more liberal laws than they do in Texas. So it didn't happen. But that's all intuitive. It was all intuitive as far as this judge was concerned. He was mad. He was really pissed. It was later that he told me I was going to molest my daughter when the decision came through, because they needed to figure all these things out. So I had to go back to court, and when I went back to court, he had petitioned the state of Indiana to relinquish custody of my children, and they refused. And since they refused, then he had no choice, because they weren't citizens of this state. He would have had to have kidnapped them, and that didn't happen. Quick judgments can be overridden by complex, deliberative thoughts, but judges must expend the effort to do so, and of course this guy didn't do that until he tried to petition the state of Indiana for my children. Can you imagine? What a jackass. I know. Why do I keep coming in contact with jackass? Why is that? Maybe it's my personality. Judges have been shown to use intuitive decision processes to respond to suggested damage awards, descriptions of litigants' conduct, and inadmissible evidence. And of course, they have to make snap decisions, and this is when they use their intuitive decision making. A lot of times, this is when a case gets thrown out of court. He makes a snap decision, it goes to the appeals court, and they decide that he should have decided it a different way. And so this is usually where a case is overturned, is in the intuitive decision area. Not in the deliberative area. Lawyers who work in law firms attend to the needs of the firm's clients. Some of them specialize, such as labor laws, and others are generalists. Other lawyers are generalists. Some lawyers work for corporations and have only one client. They're corporate employers, whoever their employer is. As we will find out, if you are a lawyer, you work for whoever you work for. And that's the only person you work for. And this is one of the reasons why if you have a friend who's a lawyer and you have to go to court to, I don't know, why are you going to court? Oh, Brian has a speeding ticket. So he's asking his friend, the lawyer, what do I do? What should I say? And if his lawyer friend, probably your lawyer friend, doesn't have anything to do with those kinds of cases, he won't give you any information because he doesn't work with those kinds of cases. So he won't even speculate because that's the way lawyers are. So being able, it's like going to if you have a friend that's a doctor and asking them about your ingrown toenail, they'll probably tell you what to do. But if you ask a lawyer about what you should do about your case, he's not going to give you any information because probably that's not the kind of law that he does, that he practices. Many lawyers work for the government on the federal, state, or local level and have only one client, the governmental unit for which they work. Okay, we were just talking about this, weren't we? We were talking about who you work for. Well, we were in counseling, we were talking about agencies. So if you work for a specific agency, you have to follow their rules. Now, it's easy for you to have your own ethics, right? It's easy for you to have your own morality. Lawyers don't. That's not very nice, is it? No, they work for one person, and they're almost myopic. This is one of the reasons why he's not going to talk about, unless he handles traffic cases all the time, he's not going to even talk about it. Because his focus is whatever his job is. As horrible and confusing as that is. So they tend to be relatively myopic. In other words, they can only concentrate on one thing. Prosecutors are government lawyers responsible for prosecuting individuals charged with crimes. Federal prosecutors, called U.S. attorneys, are appointed by the president and prosecute people for violating federal laws. This is a really serious problem with this administration, because this administration hasn't done anything with all of these U.S. attorneys. So if you look at all the people that Trump has appointed at this juncture, 9 months into his term, he has a lot of open slots, and most of them have to do with U.S. attorneys. And there's a reason why he's not filling these slots. He's kind of fighting with both sides at this point. He doesn't want to appoint Democratic people that are Democrats, because that would be wrong. He's a Republican. But he's fighting with the Republicans right now. So he's having a really difficult time filling these slots. Now the reality is, he's the President of the United States, and of course before that he was a businessman. How many thousands of lawyers does he know? Well, he knows lawyers in New York City because that's where he lived. He doesn't know anybody in Arizona, he doesn't know anybody in Colorado, he doesn't know anybody in Alaska. So he's having a really difficult time because he doesn't know who to appoint. And right now he's fighting with both sides. It should be fascinating. It's fascinating to watch. Well, it is for me because I'm a political scientist. It's fascinating to watch the difficulty that he's having. Obama had problems as well, but his problem was that he couldn't get the Republican Congress to appoint the people that he wanted appointed. That was his problem. Trump's problem is that he doesn't know who to appoint. And the advisors that he has, they don't have this kind of information. He's surrounding himself with, and he's surrounding himself with different individuals. And it's just not working at this point. He's not a political animal, and this isn't working for him.
He's trying to build a rainbow.
Let's see what happens next. It's really fascinating for me to watch, because I've been around for 67 years. I've been watching this Eisenhower and Truman and who's the next guy? Kennedy, Nixon, Ford. I've been watching this all along, and usually they will find somebody around them that will suggest to them all these people that they should appoint. But he isn't doing that, and it's really fascinating. Oh, there he is. The head prosecutors for cities and counties, called state's attorneys, are elected often in partisan elections. They prosecute individuals who have allegedly broken city, county, or state laws, because many people accused of crime cannot afford to hire a lawyer. Most defendants are represented by public defenders who are also government employees. Well, this is kind of tough. So the public defender is actually, he gets his money from the government. So who should he be loyal to? Really? He's your attorney. He better be loyal to you. Or is he? Well, that's the question. Public defenders didn't, and actually there's a reason why we have, what is that? What's that organization called? There's an organization that provides public defenders that don't work for the government. They work for the federal government, they don't work for the local government. I'm trying to think, my sister used to work for those guys. When she first became a lawyer, she worked for these legal services. It's called legal services. Legal services is funded by the federal government. So there are legal services in all these different little towns or cities.
Write that down, Brian.
Yeah, legal services. This is important. So legal services, since they are federal instead of state, they don't work for the government. Okay, there you go. Okay. That's legal services. And the reason legal services exists is because once upon a time, you would get a public defender. This is after 1963, you get a public defender, and this guy works for the judge. He works for the prosecutor. He works for the county. And you wouldn't get a fair shake. This guy would just go, well, let's plea bargain, and then he'd send you to jail for 15 years. So the federal government said, and it was bad up in the north, but it was worse in the south. And if you were African American and you got one of these public defenders, he'd just sell you down the river. He would just let you float. Anyway, so they decided, the federal government came up with legal services. And actually, Trump doesn't like legal services. He's trying to defund legal services. But that's just Trump. Bush tried to do the same thing and didn't get it done. But they didn't like legal services. Federal government spending all this money for, just to make sure that you get a fair shake. That's not right. The history of public defenders dates from Gideon and versus Wainwright in 1963, in which the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that Clarence Gideon had the right to be represented by an attorney, even if he could not afford one. And actually, that's one of the things they will tell you. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you if you don't have the money to pay this guy. Nearly 2 years after he was sentenced, Gideon was given a new trial. With the help of a free court-appointed attorney, he was acquitted. This is what Gideon looks like. He went into trial. He was convicted in a matter of minutes because he's ugly. Then he went back to trial 2 years later with a public defender, and he actually was able to get him off because it was a trumped-up charge. He's a funny-looking guy with big ears. And he wears glasses. I had to throw him in jail too, just because of the way he looks. Okay. American lawyers of the 18th and 19th century typically learned to practice law through the apprentice method. If you read about Abraham Lincoln, had very little formal schooling, and then he apprenticed himself with a lawyer in Springfield. And that's how he became a lawyer. He apprenticed himself. So he practiced. He was apprenticed to a lawyer who taught him how to look up things in law books. Influenced by the American Bar Association, the states gradually increased the educational requirements for taking the bar exam, first requiring some college, then some law school, and finally graduation from an accredited law school. Now this is really kind of interesting, because if you know a lawyer that teaches, he's not a doctor. I'm a doctor. Sarah's a doctor. Miranda Haskey is a doctor. She's an EDD. She has a doctorate. But lawyers don't have doctorates unless they get a PhD in something else. And that's one of the reasons why Dr. Austin is Dr. Austin, because he has a PhD in something else. Remember, he told you that the military was a piece of cake compared to boarding school. He told you that. But the other thing he told you was that law school is 3 times harder than getting your PhD, which I found kind of interesting. Sarah's sitting there right beside him. Of course, she's worked her ass off to get her PhD, and here he's telling her that a law degree is a lot harder. And he's got 2 degrees. So, but you don't call a lawyer a doctor. Like you call a PhD a doctor, you call an EDD a doctor. You call a Psych D a doctor, but you don't call a lawyer a doctor. I worked with an individual. He actually had a JD, a doctorate of jurisprudence, but we still didn't call him a doctor because you don't call lawyers doctors. Anyway, so this is the way it is now. The American Bar Association. And when we're talking about the American Bar Association, we're talking about it on the East Coast primarily. And they decided that we needed to change all the laws. There weren't people west of the Mississippi River who had that kind of schooling, so they had to open law schools in the west in order just to be able to try a case east of the Mississippi River. Sheldon and Krieger in 2004-2007 have found that attending law school tends to undermine students' values, their motivation, and their mental health. I guess this is a hint and a warning to those of you who want to go to law school. One of the things that happens to you when you go to law school is you do it because you have a desire to help people. And the first year of law school burns this completely out of you. A lot of people suffer from going to law school. My sister was a lawyer, and I thought she was relatively fragile. And the reason she made it through law school was because she was a feminist. And this is back in the early 1960s, and so she had that behind her, just probably very similar to Dr. Austin. He wanted to help the people on the reservation, and And he knew the only way that he could do that was to go to law school. So he fought his way through law school. My sister did exactly the same thing, but she did it because she was a feminist. And she saw that women weren't getting a fair shake, so she wanted to change things. And she did. She changed things. Dr. Austin has changed things. These are our heroes. These guys are heroes. Most of your lawyers aren't. But these two individuals specifically, my sister because she's a feminist, Dr. Austin because he supports Native rights and Native ideas, he's a hero as well. And we should honor him for what he has done, despite the fact that he didn't have that historical context. Not important. That's not important. The reality is Dr. Austin is a hero. And he's been fighting for your rights since he became a lawyer. So there you go. They suggest that psychological dysfunction is related to changes in motivation that occur over the course of one's law school career. And this is what happens to most people who go to law school. They go there for a specific reason, they have something in their mind, and it gets burned out in the first year. And they suffer from it, because there is a reason why all of you are going to college right now. There is a reason why you're here. And what if somebody told you that that reason wasn't important enough to allow you to go to college anymore? How would you feel about that? How would you like that? If some crazy white person told you that you couldn't go to college because you had misguided ideas about why you were there, would that be acceptable?
Okay, I'll start my own college in my garden.
There you go. Which looks like what we're trying to do here. We're trying to start our own college in our neighborhood. We're talking about master's degrees. They want us to work on a master's degree in psychology. It's not going to happen. There's only two of us, okay?
That's what
It's not going to happen. Not right away, anyway.
unless you hire some of us and with the first cohort.
No, that's the whole idea. I want you guys to get your PhDs and come back and take my place, okay? I'm tired. I have to walk up the damn steps every day. And now they're trying to move us over by the library. They want us to move out over by the library. So not only do I have to walk up 6 flights of steps, it's going to actually be 6 flights of steps. But I'm going to have to walk all the way from the library to here just to get to my classroom, and then I have to walk all the way up to the 6th floor.
But you won't have to put up with mice.
Well, we don't have any more mice.
Oh, you guys don't?
We don't, no. Ask Sarah about it. Yeah, she used to have mouse manure on her desk every morning.
Oh.
You. So did I. I had mice as well.
So what happened with that Chris guy? Wasn't he supposed to be another psychology instructor?
Yeah, he quit.
Was it he knew he just quit?
We probably made a mistake when we hired him. We probably made a mistake. He wasn't used to a native population. Well, he was used to a native population, but it wasn't a Native American population. He had taught over in Saipan, and they were islanders, Pacific Islanders. So he was used to that type of, and this population, he just didn't understand when he got here. So it was a bit of a culture shock. I guess I'm lucky. I taught up north, so you know how nice people are.
No, you're lucky.
It was your divorces that prepped you.
I don't want another one, okay, just to prep me a little bit more. I'm okay. Okay, Sheldon Krieger in 2004-2007, he used Deci and Ryan's 2000 self-determination theory of optimal motivation to explain the situational and personality factors that cause positive and negative motivation and eventually changes into subjective well-being. One of the things that happens to people when they go to law school is they become greedy. They think that there's only one way of thinking. Remember, I told you, when you're a lawyer, you have to be myopic. You have to focus on one little thing. I'm a corporate lawyer, and I can only think of what's the best for Apple, because I work for Apple, so everything Apple does is correct. That's the way lawyers have to think. You can't think of your client as guilty, even if they are guilty. There's nothing you can do about it. You still have to defend them. And this takes, I don't know, a shift in morality. And this has to take place in the first year of law school, or you're not going to make it. Sheldon and Krieger in 2004 found that the increase in mental health symptoms in the first year of law school was correlated with a decrease in intrinsic motivation. Remember, Ray Austin, Dr. Austin, became a lawyer so that he could defend his reservation from the federal government. My sister became a lawyer so that she could defend women in the courts. Because when she first started in law school, women didn't always inherit from their husbands. It wasn't automatic. They still had intrinsic motivation. And that's usually what causes the mental illness, is the fact that they lose whatever motivation they have, that they lose it. In the first year, students moved from pursuing their professional goals for reasons of interest and enjoyment, and that's the intrinsic motivation, of course, to pursuing goals that would please and impress others, extrinsic motivation. So as a lawyer, you have to want to please your employers. They're the ones that hired you. You have to lose your moral compass, throw it out the window. Because you have to do what is best for your client. And if your client is a thief, you have to defend them in a court of law. And being a drug dealer or being a pedophile, it doesn't really matter what the crime is. Whatever it is, you have to defend them, and that's your job. So you have to kind of take that part, the right part of your brain, and cut it out, stick it over on the shelf. Because all of a sudden you've got no morals anymore. You can't have any morals. As horrible as that seems. About 80% of lawyers said that they were proud to be lawyers, and 81% said their work is intellectually stimulating, but only about half of the respondents voiced satisfaction with their careers, and only 40% would recommend that others pursue law as a career. Most people can't handle it. This bifurcation, this splitting of your personality that has to take place in order to become a lawyer. I have the most wonderful job in the world. I get to teach people. I get my information from textbooks. I have my own information. I have my own experiences that I talk about.
One example.
Yeah, exactly. Right, I have the most wonderful job in the world. When I was working in medicine, I saved people's lives on a daily basis sometimes. Sometimes patient after patient after patient. What a great job that was. It didn't take any morality. It didn't compromise my morality. But if I had become a lawyer and I had to defend somebody that was actually guilty, how could I have done it? This is a great job. This is a fantastic job. You should all become college professors because you get to talk to people, and people become your friends. You love them and they love you, or they like you, or they tolerate you, I guess. Non-white lawyers tend to be less satisfied than white lawyers, although they still recommend a legal career to others and tend to regard law as a promising opportunity. I don't remember Dr. Austin suggesting that any of you become lawyers. He may have said it, but I don't remember him saying it. I think it would be a wonderful thing if you became lawyers. But it all depends on what kind of a lawyer you are. Remember he said, what did he say? He said, if you don't want to help natives, then you need to leave the reservation or something like that. If you're just here for the money, then you need to go someplace else, work in Phoenix or something. Lawyers are generally less satisfied than judges or law professors, of course. Being a professor is the easiest thing in the world because, we're expounding on our ideas and whatnot. We don't have to compromise our morality in order to just function. And sometimes you have to do that as a lawyer. Okay. Does that make sense? Am I talking everybody out of becoming a lawyer? Now this is the trick, okay? You need to go to law school and maintain your morality, and that is tough. And it happens in the first year. People lose their morality in the first year. But it didn't happen with Dr. Austin. It didn't happen with my sister. She was able to maintain her morality throughout her entire career. But it was hard because she worked for the state of Indiana. So the state of Indiana was her client. The legislature was her client. And she was writing laws for the legislature. And sometimes they were telling her to write laws that she didn't like. And it ate her up. And eventually she died of cancer in her 50s. So it may have had something to do with this, this bifurcation, this morality. She had to go against her own morality in order to write these laws. She wrote the laws in Indiana against stalking. She wrote the laws in Indiana against child abuse and spousal abuse. When she first started writing the law, it was a wife abuse law. And when she found out that I had been abused as a little bitty husband, she decided she'd make it spousal abuse laws. So I changed my... This is what a lawyer looks like. This is what they look like when they're a lawyer, and this is what they look like when they're home. I'm just kidding. This lady was a lawyer, and she decided to become a model. She's in Eastern Europe or something. Anyway, this is what lawyers look like. I was just trying to help you out. Lawyers without typical lawyer traits may be most discontented by the practice of law. And of course, this is what happened with my sister. Potentially, this could have happened with Dr. Austin, but of course, he was protecting his reservation. So it was probably a little bit easier for him. But if you don't have lawyer traits, if you're not willing to compromise your morality, then potentially lawyering is not the thing that you should do. I have a friend that is a very moral individual that I went to college with. Actually, about 15 of the people that I graduated from college with became lawyers, and he was one of them. But the way he was able to maintain his morality was that he's a lawyer that sues lawyers for malpractice. So that's how he does it. And he seems to be a real pretty happy guy. The other lawyers in the class, half of them are dead. Half of them are dead. One of them became a lawyer, decided that he couldn't take it anymore. So he gave up his practice and he went to medical school. And now he's a doctor. He's loving every second of it. Fantastic. I have another individual that made millions and millions of dollars on the new technology wave. I graduated from college in 1971. So, all this new technology is coming in, and he's the guy that sells this stuff to everybody. And he was a real, what's the word I can use? He was kind of a philanderer when he was in college. Once he started making millions and millions and millions of dollars, of course, he could have sex with everybody or anybody that he wanted, pretty much. And he did. But when he was in his 30s, he looked back on his life and he said, my God, I'm a son of a bitch. I can't handle this. So he decided that he would go to law school. Of course, he's accumulated millions and millions of dollars, but they're empty dollars. Because he sells electronic equipment, and he jacks up the prices. He gets them for $5 from the Japanese, and he sells them to people in Indiana for $100. And they'll buy it because it's the newest thing. So he's ripping people off. He doesn't like himself. He's been married 3 times, he's got 6 kids, but he doesn't take care of any of them because he can't remember what his wives look like. It's one of those kind of deals. I know. Yeah, so he's having a lot of sex and he's doing a lot of things and he's having a good time, but who defines what a good time is? And as far as he was concerned, it was not a positive situation. So he decided he was going to sell all of his companies, sell all of his warehouses, and he was going to go to law school, and he was going to become a prosecutor. And he did. He became a prosecuting attorney. And he worked for nothing, because he's got millions of dollars. He doesn't need any money. So he did what he thought was right. He always did what he thought was right. Unfortunately, he died in his 50s of some of the things that he did before he became a lawyer. That kind of stuff just sticks with you. makes you sick. And that's exactly what happened with him. But he was the happiest man in the world for like 15 years. Yeah. Not because he had all that money, but because he was doing the right thing. Started taking care of his kids, got married to a woman he actually liked. He knew her name. I mean, that was kind of exciting. Normally he woke up and he had no clue who she was. But he knew her name.
They have
He-
names?
Exactly. It's a good point. I'll remember you said that. Anyway, so he was happy when he died, which was kind of fun, I guess. Kind of sad, he died of a heart attack in court. And everybody loved him because he was a good guy. I mean, all of a sudden he was a good guy. He was a jackass before. I couldn't stand him in college. He was just a son of a bitch. He just wanted to make money, you know, have sex with everyone. Strange people. People generally do tend to be more confident than correct. And this is known as overconfidence bias. And of course, confidence bias. This is true of lawyers. If you talk to a lawyer, and this happened to my daughter, she went to visit one lawyer. She said, "How's my case?" He said, "We need to get it started right away. Here, give me a retainer. I know I can win this case for you." And she said, "You know, I don't know that he heard anything that I said." He kept trying to talk over her. My son was there. My son's a weightlifter. He's got arms the size of my legs. I mean, he's huge. You know, and he's sitting there and he's listening to what's going on. He said, "I don't think he heard anything you said." So she went to visit another lawyer. It was a female lawyer this time, and it was a friend of hers. She had coached a soccer team, and it was the girlfriend of the guy that she was coaching soccer with. And this lady listened to her for like an hour and a half. This guy said, "Well, you got an appointment for 30 minutes," and he listened to her for 25 minutes and then kicked her out of the office. So this other lady, this lawyer, listened to her for, she had a 45-minute appointment. They were there for an hour and a half. And Chris said, "Roxy, you need to, this needs to be your lawyer because this lady knows, she's actually listened to what you said. And she will do what you want her to do." So she went to court with the lawyer that had less experience. And so who does her significant other hire? She hires the other guy. He hires the other guy. Best lawyer in town. He was the best lawyer in town. Guess who won the case? The lady that actually listened to what my daughter had to say. But, of course, he said he could win the case for her. Overconfidence bias. He told her significant other that he would win his case for him. Of course, it's unethical for him to take that case, right? Because he had already heard the other side. Yeah, so it was unethical for him to take the case. But he did anyway, because, well, it's Florida. Anyway, he had overconfidence bias and he lost the case. For lawyers, this means that they are overly confident of their abilities, including their ability to predict and produce successful case outcomes. I wanted this lawyer to tell us we were going to win, because it made a lot of sense to me that we were going to win. But she wouldn't say that. She said, "You never know what a lawyer's going to decide." And she's right, you never know. What about my Baptist judge who's going to take my kids away from me because I don't go to church? Who would have predicted that? Is that in the statute someplace in Texas, that you have to go to church in order to gain custody of your children? Hell no, it's not in the statutes. Lawyers have to make predictions about case outcomes years in advance, and these are probabilistic estimates. The correct answer is not yet known, of course, so it's probabilistic. Lawyers, like all, make more optimistic predictions about events in the distant future than in the near future. Of course, lawyers will always tell you they're going to win the case. Why in the world would you hire somebody that didn't say they were going to win the case? I don't know if I can win this case for you, but I'll certainly take your money. I'll do my best job, but I have no idea what they're going to decide. So how do lawyers decide? Another reason for lawyers' overconfidence is their belief that the outcome of a case is largely under their control. And this is, of course, an illusion of control. The better you are at your job, the more likely that you will win. And that's an illusion of control. But the real control is with the judge, of course. So only the judge can decide who wins and who loses. I guess. If you read John Grisham novels, does anybody read Grisham? I just read one over the holiday. Did I have a holiday? It was summer break. Is that a holiday? Wait a minute, I worked all summer. What am I talking about? I didn't have a holiday, but I did read John Grisham. Anyway, his lawyers always win. I don't know if you've ever read Grisham, but they always win. Seeking feedback from other lawyers can help lawyers make more accurate predictions about future case outcomes. Researchers found that discussing the value of a case with just one other person led to the most accurate assessments. And of course, remember, they've got overconfidence bias to begin with. Do lawyers confer with other lawyers? Not very often. Because if I'm a lawyer, I'm the smartest damn lawyer in the whole wide world. Okay. So why in the world would I talk to you about a case? Right? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. All right. Anyway, that's the way it works. And that's the end of chapter 2, right? So now we need to start chapter 3. I know I'm so far behind, but let's blame Ray Austin for that, okay? He took a whole class period. Actually, I wanted him to come in, and I hope it helped you. I hope you enjoyed his conversation. It's a little bit different than it was what he said that evening, but you know, this whole criminal justice thing, this is a really good idea. So now but the problem is that we need to promote an AA degree in criminal justice so that we can send you to NAU to get your bachelor's degree in criminology or criminal justice or whatever. That's what we need to do. How many criminal justice professors do we have at Diné College? That many? Okay. So we need a criminal justice professor, obviously. I can't teach these classes. I can't keep teaching these classes. Anyway. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Bryant, hurry up.
Yeah, come on, Brian. Get arrested so that we can. Oh, I mean, yeah, okay. Become a professor. Psychology of crime. Why do people commit crimes? Oh boy, this is going to be fun. I can't wait. Questions about causes of crime are the concern of criminology, which is a study of crime and criminal behavior. When I was at Ashford, about half of my students were dual majors. They were criminal justice majors, and they were psychology majors. Really good idea if you're thinking of going into anything that deals with crime to study psychology. You need to understand why these people are doing what they're doing. Anyway, that's criminology, studying criminology. Fascinating, fascinating topic. It's not normal psychology. But the reality is, if Bryant were a criminal, I couldn't tell that he was a criminal just by talking to him, just by counseling this individual. Serial killers, mass murderers, people like Ted Bundy was able to confuse and get away with all kinds of interesting murders, despite the fact that he had been tested over and over again, and nobody read him as somebody that was a psychopath. But he was. He's a psychopath. Hardest thing in the world. Two people that are really difficult to diagnose. One of them is a psychopath, and the other one is an alcoholic. And the question is, are alcoholics psychopaths is the question. They're really good liars. They're like the best liars in the whole wide world. It's crazy. Or not. But they want to drink, and so how do they continue drinking? Well, they create chaos around them, and in order to be with that alcoholic, you have to be an enabler. They will surround themselves with enablers. So these people are in denial about their problems. As exciting as that is.
Like your character, Bruce.
I'm sorry? Like my character Sly, yeah, exactly. I'm not a bad alcoholic, I'm pretty good at it. According to National Crime Victimization Survey, the rate of violent crime has been dropping since 1999. If you listen to all the things that the people were saying in the last election, it didn't look like that. One side was saying crime is at an all-time high, and the other side was saying that crime is going down. And the side that won was not telling the complete truth. The other side was correct. But they didn't win the election, so it really doesn't matter. The rate of violent crime is still relatively high despite recent decreases. 17 out of every 1,000 residents age 12 or older living in an urban area were victimized by violent crime in 2009. Okay, we have a problem with crime on this reservation, but they cleaned it up a little bit. Pinyon was really skewing the violent crime results on the reservation because of all the crystal meth out in Pinyon. They just found it was last year that they found the baby's head. No, they didn't. They found his body. They haven't found his head yet. In Venado, somebody decapitated a child. We're not exactly sure. We still don't know what's happening. Anyway, lots of violent crime. Urban areas, it's worse. My daughter was teaching in Fort Myers, Florida, at Cypress Lake High School in Fort Myers. They would have 3-4 fights a week. Violent crimes going on. They had a rape in behind one of the dumpsters. Football players. So what happened next? Nothing, of course. Football players. 3 or 4 times a week. So my daughter's got a job up in Clinton, Iowa, to teach up in Clinton, Iowa. They had 3 fights all last year. And of course they're telling her, well, there's a criminal element here, and we have a little bit more violence than other schools. We had 3 fights last year. And of course my daughter she's only 4'11", and she's breaking up fights. In her school, every week, she's out there getting punched. She never punches. She doesn't have to. She's military. She understands how to take people down without hurting them. Anyway, so urban area is a lot worse. That's my point. So she's up in Clinton, Iowa. It's a much nicer place. 3 fights all last year. Last year, they had 3 fights a week in Florida, much more urban. In 2002, you may remember this. I do because I had just left Washington, D.C. These kinds of things happen every time I leave someplace. I left Oklahoma City, and the next year, McVeigh blew up the Murrah building, the year after I left. I left Lubbock, Texas. The year after that, they got hit by a tornado, killed 150 people, wiped out half the city. So I leave Washington, D.C., and the sniper all of a sudden pops up. There were 2 of them, John Allen Muhammad, that's the older guy, and Lee Boyd Malvo, the younger guy. They terrorized Washington, D.C. metropolitan area for about 3 months. They randomly shot 13 people, killing 10 of them. And of course they were active for 3 months. So should we be worried about snipers? Well, it's always possible, but well, maybe we should. 2004, Charles Allen McCoy Jr. began sniping at cars passing by on the interstate. Dubbed the Ohio Highway Sniper, McCoy killed 1 woman and terrorized many more people on the Ohio interstates. So last year when I drove up here, is that right? Yeah, last year when I drove up here, somebody had been sniping cars on the interstate in New Mexico. So I'm driving through for some reason my wife packed potato chips for me to bring down here. Okay. So I'm driving through Albuquerque, and I know that somebody's been sniping cars, and so I'm driving through Albuquerque, and of course I'm up in the mountains. All of a sudden one of my potato chip packages exploded in the back, and of course I'm in this traffic, and I'm thinking, oh my God, somebody's shooting at me. But it turned out to be my potato chips, and nobody shot at me.
I think there was one down in Phoenix area that was also.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, off the 101, was it the 101? Yeah.
Nobody shot me, okay? But this time. Maybe next time. Maybe they'll be sniping at me next time. Although the number of serious violent offenders offenses committed by persons ages 12 through 17 declined by 61% from 1993 to 2005. Juveniles continue to be responsible for committing about 24% of violent crimes. Okay. Now, as long as they're under the age of 18, they can't be tried as an adult in some states. In other states, they can be. So you need to know where you are as to what kind of crimes you can commit and get away with it. I told you the story of my cousin. He's actually my second cousin. Didn't I tell you the story? He murdered the guy. Okay. He was hitchhiking, the guy picked him up, and they decided they wanted to steal his car, so they ran over the guy. And my second cousin was only 16 years old. So he takes off for Ohio, because Ohio doesn't extradite juveniles. So he's okay, he's murdered a guy, but he's safe in Ohio and free in Ohio, nothing's going to happen to him. He committed the crime in Illinois. But Indiana wants him back because Indiana will try him as an adult. Because Indiana has that law. They will try a juvenile as an adult if the crime is serious enough. And murder tends to be one of those crimes. So eventually, of course, the idiot comes back. So he stays in Ohio for 2 years, wanted to visit his girlfriend in Indiana, came back to Indiana, got arrested. And of course, by this time he's 18, so now, yes, they're going to throw the book at him. Not only that, but the other guy that actually did the killing has turned state's evidence against him. So he got 10 to 15, so my cousin gets life in prison because he came back to visit his girlfriend. Lust, I swear. Women, there's so much trouble, aren't they? Anyway, so he's in jail forever. Actually, he's been released. So, that was, I don't know, 35 years ago or so. Youths under 18 years of age will commit approximately 12% of sexual assaults, 18% of robberies, 22% of aggravated assaults, and 8% of all homicides. When I was 18 years old, I had sex with a 16-year-old. I know. Statutory rape. I know. I married her the next year, not important. It was still statutory rape, right? Sexual assault. Can a 16-year-old consent to sex, to having sex? It all depends on the state. It really all depends on the state. Luckily, I was in the state of Indiana. I guess I was, anyway, so you can see what's going on here. Was it 18? I was 19. No, I was 18. 1999 through 2000, 71% of students in public schools reported experiencing one or more violent incidents, and 20% reported serious violent incidents, which included rape, sexual battery other than rape, a physical fight with a weapon, and robbery with or without a weapon, 20% of the individuals in school. However, only about 36% of these schools reported one or more of these incidences to the police. In other words, they don't have to tell the police unless somebody wants to prefer charges. And that's what happened with the sexual assault. Well, with the rape behind the dumpsters, the football players. They decided, the girl decided that she would not press charges. Or the girl's family decided she would not press charges. It's still rape, still sexual assault, and there were still 4 of them. 3 of them held her down while 1 individual raped her. But the family settled, well, they settled out of court, I guess. Somebody gave somebody money and everybody was happy, or not happy or something. Anyway. In February 2009, an 8th grader named Lawrence King was shot in the head and died while sitting in his classroom in Oxnard, California. His classmates, of course, were horrified to see this boy's brains splashed all over the wall. Police allege that the shooter was a 14-year-old Brandon McInerney, who previously taunted King because King was gay. At the time, King was living in a shelter for abused and troubled children, and of course now he's not alive anymore. 8th grader shot by a 14-year-old. That happens. 2006, Warren Messner and 3 other boys beat a homeless man to death in Daytona Beach, Florida, because they were bored. What do you do when you're bored? Go out and beat somebody to death, of course. What do you do when you're bored? You play video games, of course. And the video games are violent, and of course you're shooting zombies in the head.
No, zombies on a break right now.
Can you kill a zombie without shooting them in the head?
You can.
Can you make a torso shot? And Still kill a zombie, of course.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Shoot him.
You can wait
Everybody
till they
knows.
get
you
up close and you stab them with a knife.
stab him where? Where are we stabbing him?
In the jugular, in the jugular.
You have to stab him in the neck, and then black blood comes.
No, it's still red.
Is it
It's
red?
still red on video.
They're zombies and they have red blood.
I don't know what zombie she's fighting.
Okay, so how did they kill this guy?
Half alive ones.
This is so cool. The boys jumped up and down on the man's chest, and they crushed his rib cage. They were sentenced to 22 to 35 years in prison, but they were underage. But in Florida, of course, you can try somebody as an adult if they are a juvenile. We all know of this case. April 1999, Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold shot and killed 12 of their classmates and a teacher before they shot themselves. They shot themselves. They didn't shoot each other, they shot themselves. Committed suicide. But they killed 12 people before that. And of course, I didn't say how many people they wounded. Anyway, those two guys weren't nice people. 17% of high school students had carried a weapon, a gun, a knife, or a club at least once in the previous months, and about 6% of those students carried the weapon to school. So this is happening. I don't know if it happens here. I don't know if people are carrying weapons on the reservation in high schools. Is it that dangerous in high schools? I got a yes, I got, what? Is it?
Depends
Maybe.
on where you're at.
You went to school in Montana.
I went to school in South Dakota.
South Dakota? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. How was it in South Dakota?
Scary.
Dangerous? Scary?
But I think it depends on where you're from, because like, where I'm from, I believe in when I was growing up, we didn't have school violence like this.
Okay.
And we didn't carry weapons, and I think our whole motto was, if you're gonna get into a fight, it's with your fists and not a knife or a gun, you know?
Okay, that's
Were
logical.
you guys in school?
But that's not in South Dakota, that's in Montana.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, in South Dakota too.
South Dakota, they have the same philosophy of life.
I think with mine growing up in high school, because I grew up in Bloomfield, was more
In Louisville?
Bloomfield,
Bloomfield.
New Mexico. By
By Farmington.
Farmington.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was more gang violence. A
Okay.
lot of brown pride, Hispanics. You know, it was kind of,
Sure.
bothersome.
So it was dangerous? It was
Sometimes.
kind of
yeah.
dangerous. But
It depended.
if you weren't a member of a gang, did you have to worry about it?
Not really, they didn't really bother me. I got along
They
with
just
them.
bothered each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah, I got along with them. I was down with them.
You gotta remember, you gotta be down with them, okay. Is anybody in a gang here? Do I need to be down with anybody? Shelley's in that.
Delia's in a game.
I know you pee now.
In 2005 to 2006 school year, 17% of public schools experienced at least one serious violent incident at school, 17%. Smaller percentage of primary schools, 67%, than middle schools, 94%, or high schools, 95%, experienced a violent incident in 2005, 2006. So as we can see, middle schools are just as dangerous as high schools. You went to Chinman, right?
Chin-Lee, not Chili.
Chile. You went to Chile. You went to Chin-Lee. Oh, here's a nice looking guy. February 14th, 2008, at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb, Illinois, I'm sorry. It's DeKalb down in Georgia. It's DeKalb in Illinois. Stephen Kasmerick opened fire with a shotgun and 3 pistols in a crowd of students on campus, killing 5 students and injuring an additional 17 people before fatally shooting himself. One of the individuals he shot was a professor who was standing on the stage, and he came up behind the guy and shot him in the back of the head, didn't kill him, and then he started popping away at the students in the auditorium. This was a class, it was a gen psych class at Northern Illinois. Anyway, he killed 5 students and he shot 17, wounded 17, including the professor, who didn't die, by the way. even though he shot him in the head. I don't know what that means. On the Red Lake Indian Reservation in Red Lake, Minnesota, 16-year-old Jeffrey Wise killed his grandfather, who was a tribal police officer, and his grandfather's girlfriend at their home. And this is actually a picture of him. After taking his grandfather's police weapons and vest, Wise drove his grandfather's police vehicle to Red Lake Senior High School, where he was a student. Wise shot and killed 7 people at the school and wounded 5 others.
It's Weiss.
I'm sorry? Weiss, I'm sorry, thank you.
When was that?
When was it?
2 years ago?
It was when I was up in Fort Belknap. So it was 2007, 2008. Weiss, thank you. Did I misspell it? No. Weiss, okay.
No, they pronounce it Weiss.
I believe you. That's the German pronunciation. See, that's what I get for being white. I pronounce everything like a German. We all remember this case, April 16, 2007, on the campus of Virginia Tech University in Blacksburg, Virginia. And if you've ever been to Blacksburg, it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's out in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. Anyway, it's out there, and there's nothing around Blacksburg except Blacksburg. Sung Hui Cho, a South Korean immigrant of 15 years and a senior at Virginia Tech, shot and killed 32 people and wounded 17 others in 2 separate attacks. The crazy part was he attacked people at his dormitory, and he was able to leave his dormitory without anybody saying anything and go to a classroom, and he then killed more individuals. 32. Most of the people that he killed were in the classroom. He went into a classroom and just started popping people off. And I can't remember the question that he asked. He asked them a question, are you a Christian or something? And I can't remember. Some people he let go and some people he didn't. But he eventually killed 32 people. And this is one of the reasons why we have training every year to block the door. So if somebody came to shoot Brian, of course, he would be the main target. Could we secure the door? Could we secure the door?
No,
Why not?
because it opens up.
It opens out, that's perfect. All we need to do is tie the door to a table. And when they try to pull it open, they can't, because the table would be jammed in the doorway. So all we need to do is secure the doorknob to a table, and they
To
won't
the
be able to
heaviest
get it.
person.
I'm sorry?
Or to the heaviest person.
Is there
All of us.
a window? There is a window.
Yeah.
Okay. So all we have to do is stay away from the window, secure the door with the, see? We'll be okay. Make me go someplace else.
So you
We have
have
to go to
some.
another room.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a way of protecting ourselves in this classroom. Don't worry, if somebody comes and tries to get in the door, I can secure the door. If we have warning, I can secure the door before, and we can do it with belts, we can do it with ropes, we can do it with shirts, we can do it with, anything will work. Because he's not going to be able to pull the door open, even if it's unlocked, he's not going to be able to pull the door open as long as we secure it to a table. Okay. How about that? So do you feel safe now? Don't worry. I got you covered. I got you covered. I got your back. Don't worry. Then we'll just put Brian standing in the doorway. Of course, there's a window there, so you can shoot through the door. I just assumed it was a male. It could be a female. Is it safe to assume it's a male?
Brian, you didn't piss off any girls, did you?
How many females become mass murderers? Hardly any. How many natives become serial killers?
None.
Not very many. So the most dangerous person in this room
It's Bruce.
is me. I'm the most dangerous person. Yeah, exactly.
The reason I say there's a lot is when you look at gang violence, women gangs are way worse than men. They're more brutal.
Potentially, but we're talking about a mass murder. So if we're talking about mass murderers, almost all those people were white. I don't know if you noticed that or not. One guy was Asian, one guy was Native, and everybody else is white. So nobody was African.
too, Washington Killers.
Oh, those two, yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, okay. So the most dangerous person are white people with guns. You know, of course, we're always screaming about our Second Amendment rights.
What about,
Arm me, I'm dangerous.
Kenya, that shooting in the mall? I forget.
Right.
Did you hear about that
Mhm.
one? I forget when it was, but there was like multiple African Kenyans, you know, that were shooting their own people.
Right.
Why were they doing that? Were they like?
They were Boko Haram.
Is that like a?
It's a Muslim, it's like ISIS.
Oh, okay.
They were just trying to create chaos. Okay. Common characteristics identified in boys responsible for school ground killings, more than the usual experience with firearms, showing a persistent fascination with guns. These are the Second Amendment people, so you have to be very careful. Yeah, when do you train your child to use a weapon? Be very careful, because you may be training them to be a serial killer or a mass murderer. Isolation, rejection, or torment by classmates, particular difficulty relating to girls. So if it's a male, of course, your sexual urges tend to be very strong because you're an adolescent. And if you are having a difficult time relating to the opposite sex, then of course this can become a frustration for you, and the frustration can cause violence. So we've got fascination with weapons, we have isolation and difficulty with the opposite sex, preoccupation with various forms of graphically violent media, including music, internet sites, and video games. And this is a warning as well. And for that reason, that's the reason Brian's at the end of the table, because he plays violent video games, and we all need to be careful of him. But the reality is, anything that's graphically violent. So if they adhere to this, in the old days, we used to call this hebephrenia. Hebephrenia, it means a fascination with death and dying and violent things. People that are hebephrenic tend to draw pictures of severed heads, people stabbing people and blood gushing out. They draw these kinds of pictures. We used to refer to them as schizophrenic, because they obsess with violence. But the reality is, now you don't have to draw your own pictures, you could just look at it on the internet. Look at all this violent stuff. There's violent stuff on the internet dealing with actual killings, people actually dying. And of course, they would have a fascination with that as well. Violent music, of course, the music that talks about offing policemen and whatnot. Busting a cap in someone's ass. I saw that.
Wait for you
I
to
saw
say
that.
that phrase ever since we got here.
Movie once.
Got here.
So yeah, okay, all right. So what do we have here? We have an individual that's fascinated with firearms, can get along with the opposite sex, and is fascinated with violence. And that includes violent video games, the whole zombie thing. I don't know if that includes Halo 3 or whatever. In Halo, you're shooting
Spartans.
Spartans?
They're also still,
They're aliens, aren't they?
well, in the campaign they're aliens. If you play online multiplayer, you can play other soldiers.
Of course, if you play, what's the one that takes place in you steal cars?
Grand Theft Auto.
Grand Theft Auto.
What? Which one?
Grand Theft Auto?
Grand Theft Auto, okay, yeah, you get to shoot real human beings. Is it? Where you kill them, don't you? Well, you have sex with prostitutes, which, it has to be the most fun thing in the whole wide world. Having sex with a prostitute in the backseat of a car.
I don't know, I haven't played that one yet.
Okay, all right. I haven't played that one either. I just heard about it. Possible school reforms require school uniforms, of course, so that you can identify people by the clothes that they wear. Of course, a problem in Pinyan was the fact that they had all these gangs, and each one had their own color, and you couldn't wear a specific color to school, blue, red, whatever it was, yellow. There was one gang in yellow. Anyway, so force them to wear school uniforms, beefing up security measures, making sure that there's somebody around. One of the reasons we have so many people wandering around our campus is to scare people off, and it works. If you think that that there is security here, somebody that wants to do harm to somebody is going to think twice, because potentially there's somebody to stop it. Of course, all of us would stop a violent situation. Passing tougher gun laws, of course, but with Second Amendment rights, that doesn't seem to be able to happen. Offering violence prevention programs, restricting access to violent movies, profiling to predict which students are likely to commit violent crimes. This causes many students to be unjustly targeted, of course. Who are the most violent people on this campus? Obviously, it's the white people, so you need to be careful. We can profile white people, of course. In this case, this white chick right here is the most dangerous person. No, it's this white guy right here that's the most dangerous person. Increasing communication between students and school administrators, of course, because you guys know what's going on out there. You have to be down with people, right? Is that what I just learned? Being down, okay. So, if you're down with people, potentially, of course, you're going to have the information that something violent's going to happen. Fighting is going to take place. Boston Red Sox are going to take on New York Yankees or something. So if you wear the Boston hat, some Yankee's going to attack you or something. Don't figure that one out yet. Okay, so these are ways to fight school violence. Why don't we stop right here? We'll take this up next time. Right here on Chelsea Street. I know, I'm behind. I'm way behind, but